Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H Event Space. You're tuned into Techniques for Photographing in Hard Light, hosted by Sony. And for that, I would like to welcome, I'm going to call you the Master of Light because nobody does it better than you, man. Sony Artisan of Imagery, Scott Robert Lim. Scott, how's it going?
Thank you for the awesome intro. I'm doing good. I'm ready to,
You're ready to
lecture, and
run.
I
You're
got a
ready to run.
ton of info I gotta get out.
You know what that means? Then I got to get out. So you guys know what to do. Ask your questions. I'll see you in a bit for some Q&A. Let's go.
Let's do it. All righty. Let's get my lecture going. Share the screen. This is always the weird part because I'm trying to click everything. All right. High pressure lighting. Overcoming bad light situations. So let me talk a little bit about myself. 1 second. My name is Scott Robert Lim. I'm a Sony artisan. And if you want to check out everything I'm about, workshops, portfolio, I kind of consider myself a specialist in on-location portraiture, whether that's weddings or street photography or portraits. I love it. I love the challenge. I believe it's the hardest thing to do. And I'm going to share you some concepts that I've learned over the last 20 years or so. But as you go into your session, time is your enemy. And I wish we would have unlimited time. And especially if you're a wedding photographer, you know this. You see on your schedule, oh, hey, I got 45 minutes to shoot the bride and groom. Guess what? You only got 10 minutes because every wedding runs over time. So over the years, I wanted to create a workflow, right? And find shots with no or easy setup and create an efficient workflow and reduce the confusion. I remember early in my career, sometimes I didn't know what to do. Should I use video light? Should I use flash? Should I use natural light? And a lot of times I would just do it all because I didn't know. And that's not actually the best workflow because it takes so much time. Now I go into a situation, okay, I'm going to do this. If I got extra time, maybe I'll do this. So I have a very efficient workflow that I want to show you what I've learned over the past 20 years and what I do in every single lighting situation. So there's a low light situation, there's shade, and of course what we're talking about is bright light or harsh light. That is the most difficult. But the thing is, if there's evidence of bright light, there's going to be shade because the only way you make shade is with bright light, right? And so even though there's bright light, you're going to still find great techniques to use in all these situations. I use a video light in the low light situation. I love using the open shade technique, which I'm going to talk about a little bit extensively. And then in bright light, we normally use strobes, right? That's what you think of. That's the most difficult thing to do. As you know it, you get your flash out, you get your trigger out, your assistant hits one button, and all of a sudden you're in multi-mode. What the heck is multi-mode? I mean, why do they even have multi-mode? I mean, does anybody use multi-mode, right? And then you're trying to get it out of there. Oh, wait a second. The channels are not matched up, and then the transmitter's not working, and all this. Oh, you're putting it on a new camera, and you forgot to set the wireless. Oh man, right? So I'm gonna forget about that for now in the bright light situation using a strobe, and I'm gonna give you some formulas that work really well using bright light or harsh light. Okay, so let's get to it. Now you don't want setup, right? Because if you don't have to set up your lighting, you get more quality shots, get more time to be creative, and you're not having to worry about your light. And so I'm going to go through 3 scenarios, the open shade technique, which is evident when there's harsh light. So you can find this open shade whenever there's harsh light. There's direct sunlight, of course, using the hard light. There's ways of using the hard light that looks great and actually you should do because it looks so good. And then 3, if you have to create light, I'm going to show you the most easy and efficient ways to do it. Um, uh, Especially if you're not really into, strobes and lighting and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to show you some easy ways to work around and how to create light easily. Okay, let's talk about open shade. I know you guys have heard about it, but what is it exactly? And look at this photo. How many lights are present, right? This is a 2-light setup. Did I set up any of this light? No. I just found it in my environment. And I'm going to show you how to find this type of beautiful lighting in your environment. But first you have to realize how to create a catch light. Now, what is a catch light? You see those long little bright spots in the eyes? That's what really makes a photo. If you don't have that catch light, I'm sorry, you don't have a portrait. I mean, for me, every photo has to have a catch light or else it's just, they say catch lights are like the mirror to your soul. I totally believe that. And so, but let's analyze what that darn catch light is. And a lot of people don't know. They just, oh, it's a bright spot or whatever. Yes, it is. But let's break it down to the science. Let's magnify that catch light and see what that subject's looking at. Well, I'm dead center, as you can see. And so first of all, a catch light is created by the sky when the subject is in the shade. Okay, so there has to be a contrast of lighting. The subject must be in a much darker area than the source that they're looking at. And you don't want to look at the direct sun. You want to look at the sky that the sun is shining on. So let's look at this catch light. Let's blow it up huge. Now, the subject must be surrounded by shade. You see that dark area? You have to have darkness in your eye in order for you to have a catch light. And the catch light is created what? By the sky. Now, whenever you see catch lights and they're long horizontal catch lights, that means that they're most likely using the open shade technique, and they're using the sky as their catch light. That's why it looks like it's long and skinny, because that's the horizon of the sky. And so if you could, let's break this shot down even more by some diagrams. So if you place here's the sun, right? And it's creating shade on this buildings, but it's peeking through to light the hair up on my subject to give me that beautiful rim light. And I love hard light for rim light, because rim light, you need a strong light to do it. And so hard light works great for rim light. But then the sun also creates soft light where it's shining in the sky, and the sky is brighter than the shade. And so therefore it creates a catch light. And that is the open shade technique. And I use this all the time. Here I am. Look it works in Paris. You can go to Paris and use it. No matter where you are in the world, you can use it. Now, you can see this technique where they got some backlight, slight backlight behind them. And if you look at the eyes, you could see the long, skinny catch light in one person's eye. But why is the other subject doesn't have that catch light? It's because even though they're positioned in the right light, if the subject is not looking into the light source, which is the sky, you're not going to get a catch light. So it's very important. If you want that catch light, they have to both be looking at the source. When I shoot couples, honestly, for me, it's all about the female subject here. As long as she looks good, then I'm good. And so I'm not too worried about it. I'll do this shot. I'll have the groom look back at the groom, but I'll also have him look at the sky too, so I could get both catch lights, but I usually choose which photo that I like. But that's important to remember. If you want that catch light, both subjects, or the subject has to look into the light source. So even though you might position your subject in the open shade in the perfect position, the eyes still have to look towards the brighter sky. And that's very important. Now, if you don't want to blow out the highlights, because obviously when you do this technique with the sun behind, if you shoot at the sky behind them, it's going to be bright sun and you're going to blow out a bunch of highlights. Now, if you want that, that's fine. But if you don't, you just got to shoot below the horizon. So if you shoot below the horizon, you're going to have information back there and you won't blow your highlights out. And let's go into detail a little bit more. Now look at this photo here. I have shooting up towards the sky, right? And so you can see that blown out sky. And there's two different exposures. There's the sky, which the sun is shining backlight towards, which is bright, and then there's basically the shade where the subject is, and those are completely different exposures. So if I expose for the subject, then the sky is going to be blown out. So let's say I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to blow out the sky. I'm in the same exact position and I'm shooting differently. I'm shooting below the horizon, and now look at, I have no blown highlights. I got some nice, beautiful, as the sun backlits that foliage behind him, the green, it's basically the same exposure. The background exposure might be a little bit brighter, but that's cool. I like that effect. And so now you get the same exposure just by changing my position and my camera angle. I'm not even using any lighting here. I'm just changing my position so I don't blow out the sky. I'm shooting down on my subject, and if you look closely at her eye, you could see that catch light is what? A long, skinny catch light. You know that that's the sky in front of her. Now here, that was in Austin, Texas. Guess what? You could do it in Central Park. I think last year we had an awesome workshop. Hopefully we could do that again this summer. We went to Central Park, and actually we shot in the same area. And look at, you got the backlight behind on the hair, but if you notice, the exposure on the face is this matches the exposure in the background because I'm shooting below the horizon. And so I got that beautiful rim light, but then I've got the matching exposure on the face as it on the background, and nothing's really blown out other than the highlight, which I want. So you're getting two light sources without setting anything up. Now, here again, you don't have to do that all the time. I blew out the sky. I wanted that backlight because I was doing this dandelion thing, and I wanted the light behind the little dandelion things that are blowing around to kind of light it up. So I had no choice here because, the position they were in and all that kind of stuff. So you can blow the highlights out if you want to. That's an artistic approach, but I just want you to know how to control whether you want to blow it out or not blow it out using this technique with the open shade. You can see there's two different backgrounds. The background exposure is much brighter than the face. Okay, so let's keep moving on here. Okay, so now I'm shooting in the same area. I've got the backlight. See that beautiful rim light by the sun? Now I'm sort of shooting below the horizon. You could see the sky is blown out, but I would say 80% of the picture is not blown out. So I'm cool with that. I wouldn't submit this into competition. If I did, I'd get torn up. Oh, the highlights are all blown out. This guy doesn't know anything about lighting. Hey, man, I wanted to do that, okay? So anyways, so a little bit is fine too, but I just really, it's all about the glow and the backlight. And so you can see there's three different exposures here. There's a sky, which is brighter than the face, but the face and the trees are about the same. So it works for me. Now, here's another situation. As that sun goes lower, you're going to get that beautiful, see that beautiful rim light around the subject, and then look at the catch light in the eye. right? Especially you can notice the subject on the left where her pupils are darker. What kind of shape is that catch light in? It's a long, skinny catch light, meaning what? It's the horizon of the sky. There's no lighting set up here. It's just take your camera, put your subject in the right position, shoot it, boom. You get a two light setup without doing anything at all. Beautiful lighting, no setup, two lights. That should be your project. Everybody, I want you to look through your photos, see how many of these photos that you have. Now, as the sun sets and gets lower, there's going to be more shade available. Why is that? Because when the sun sets, the shadows get longer. And as the shadows get longer, there's more shade. So you're going to get more chance to do this as the sun sets. Okay, so you got a two light setup. You got the main light. What is your main light? The main light is the sky, and that's soft light. Then the rim light is the hard light, which is behind the subject. Now, what's the definition between soft light and hard light? Hard light is when the source is very, very small. So if you look up to your source and you measure it with your fingers and you're just like going, oh, wow, that's a teeny light source, then you're going to get hard light. But if you look up your source, now in this case, they're looking up at the sky. The sky is huge, right? And so therefore, when you got a large light source, it's going to create that soft light. Now, what's the characteristics of soft light? It's perfect for portraits because it doesn't have very harsh shadows. It still can create shadows, but they're very soft, and so it's very pleasant for a portrait in general. I mean, you can use hard light. I'm going to show you later hard light techniques that look good too. But in general, soft light looks great. Now, I love doing this open shade technique area when I can find a dark background. So I'm walking the streets of Santa Monica, and they're doing construction here, and they have these black, I don't know what they are, but it looked cool. And I go, this is perfect. So I put my subject behind there, and then I had the subject look up towards the sky. Now the problem is I'm generally about the same height as her, but if you look at the camera angle, doesn't it look like the camera angle is shooting down on my subject? That's because I raised my camera over my head, because if she's looking up towards the sky, I want the back of my camera or the sensor to be on the same plane as the face. So as her chin moves up to look at the sky, then I need to move my camera up to match that plane of her face, so the face doesn't look distorted. So I'll do this when you're using open shade technique. A lot of times your subjects are looking up. And if the subject is taller than you, you're going to be shooting up their nose, and that's not too pleasant sometimes. So that's why you have to raise your camera to make sure that the plane of the face is kind of parallel to the plane of the camera sensor. I can't really demonstrate that, so I hope you understand that, but you can ask questions later. But anyways, here, and I love the technique, this low-key technique where I find a dark background, and especially if I have a dark-skinned subject, I love it. I love that look, because if you're a light fanatic, you're gonna love dark skin, because when you're in great lighting, the highlights and the shadows really come out on dark skin. It's hard to see highlights and shadows on lighter skin, but you could readily see it on dark skin. So if you're into lighting, you're going to love using this technique because all the highlight and shadows are shown. So good lighting is enhanced with dark skin. So if you're great at lighting, you're going to love shooting with dark skin because it's really going to come out. Here I do the same technique. Now, why do I have her kneel down lower? I have her down lower because she has to look up towards the sky. And so if she's standing up, that makes it difficult for me to get above her and have that camera plane of the sensor equal to the plane of her face, right? So if she tips her chin up, if she's standing up, it's not going to look pleasant because it's going to look slightly distorted because the chin is going to be slightly closer than her forehead, and it's going to distort the face of the subject. So I have this, a lot of times when I do this, I have this subject kneel down or get in a lower position. I'm standing above the subject, and as she's looking up into the sky, she's looking straight into my camera. And so therefore, I get the catch light. She could even look at me and I'll still get a catch light at that point. So if she was standing a lot, and then you're standing, and let's say she's, at your same height or taller, then she's going to look down on you and you're not going to get the catch light because the catch light is up in the sky. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, now I love this open shade technique because you don't have to set up lighting when you're covering a large area or you're doing group shots, or you need to shoot just not like, the waist up, but if you got to shoot like a large area, this technique works the best. And so I have a tip. You're either going to put your subjects in all shade or all sun. And so here's the same wedding, right? And so I got the now this is a lot of bridesmaids. So and they want to do this shot, right? And so I had to get them all in the bright sun. Now, on the other hand, the grooms, there's a large bridal party. I put them all in the shade. And so now they're all evenly lit, and I don't have to set up any lighting at all. And so that's the beauty of this method of you don't have to set up any lighting. And so here's another wedding. This is like the perfect scenario you want. As the sun is setting, right? It's creating a lot of shade. I put my subject in the shade, but the sun is still peeking through. So see that little highlight around their hair separating them from the background? I love that. And so now they're in open shade. Their faces can look into any direction and they're evenly lit. Like if you were to have to do that and set up your lighting, you'd probably at least need 2 lights for a group like this to set up, and that takes time. Here you could use the open shade technique. You could shoot large groups of people, no blown out highlights, everybody's face is lit correctly. It's an equal exposure on everything from the background to the subjects. And so it's so easy to do these group shots. And I love doing these types of group shots where I don't have to set anything at all. I could just make them interact. I could focus more time on the pose or what I want them to do. And I don't have to think about setting up shots with lighting. I can just go and be more creative and get more shots. And so now here's in Mexico. This technique even works in Mexico. Oh man, amazing. So here's a large bridal party. Now, if I were to light this, I'd have to set up my 2 flashes and all that kind of stuff, but I put them in an open shade area and boom, I got beautiful lighting on everybody, no setup. Now I can concentrate on, okay, I'm gonna create little pods here. Give me 3 chairs, bring 3 chairs and pose them around the 3 chairs. And so I could be more creative in my posing, make sure everybody's looking good, all that kind of stuff, because I don't have to set up the lighting. Now, you could do some fun stuff too, as long as they're all in the shade. A lot of times I have them run towards me, right? And I have them act crazy. I'll say, hey, I want you guys to run towards me, and I want you to pretend like you're having the time of your lives and just talk with your hands, right? And so that's how I get that shot. I kind of prompt them, but I put them in the great lighting. And so as they're moving towards me, right, if you were to set up your lighting, it would be brighter towards the closer to the camera and then darker towards the back of the, if they're farther away, if you had to set up lighting, not unless you're doing it in TTL or something like that. But lighting would be very difficult to do this shot. But if you're doing it in open shade, it's easy peasy, right? Another, posing, a large group, put them in the shade. Look at the beautiful cat's lights in their eyes, right? I didn't have to set up any lighting, just using this open shade technique. Looks beautiful. Same thing here. I had the girls kind of gather together before they're going to walk down the aisle because I noticed the beautiful light behind them, creating that rim light, and just having them interact. I didn't have to worry about setting up lighting. It looks very natural, looks very organic too, which looks good. Okay, so that's the open shade technique. Now, you can also do the open shade technique with reflection. So if there's harsh light, that harsh light will create shade because you can't have good shade without bright light. So if there's bright light out there, if there's harsh light out there, there is shade. And if you find it, you can use that to your advantage. And many times that sunlight is going to shine on the ground and create an amazing reflector for you. You don't even have to bring one, right? You just look for it. It's right there. Also, buildings will also create amazing, huge reflectors. And a lot of times I'm using a building as a reflector. That's like 100 feet wide. Do you really want to bring a 100-foot reflector with you? No, you can find it in your environment. You can find it on the ground. You can fire it on the wall, and it will create beautiful, soft light because it makes the light larger as it reflects off of the ground or off of building. And I love using this technique all the time. Here I am in Paris, and the light is bright and it's shining on the ground, and you could see the catch light is under her eye, and it has that glowing feeling to it. And you can see the catch light there. I'm there in the middle taking the picture, and you can see, well, this was overcast at the time, but the sun came out. I started here and then the sun came out, and I had to push her back into those areas where the shade was. So the sun came out, I had to push her back in there, and I'm using the ground that is right there as my reflector to create an awesome shot. Here's just in a different area, but she's basically in the same position on the same side where the shade is. Look at her catch lights in her eyes. You can see that that is the ground below, creating this beautiful, soft uplight that I just found. It was just right there. And it's about finding these things and putting your subject in the right position to find that great light. Now here you can use it off this pillar. So I'm in Pasadena here. I see the light shining in through this pillar. I go, I'm going to use that as my reflector, right? So that's a nice big reflector. I don't have to set up, and boom, I get this shot right here. It's beautiful, soft light. Don't have to set up at all. It's just using reflection. I love this shot here. The sun's shining behind my subject, but there's that gray wall in front of them that you don't know. So it's hitting that gray wall, and it's like my huge, 10 by 20 foot reflector that's just lighting them up, giving them the beautiful catch light in the eye. And it was just by the wall that was in front of them. Now, look here. We are in New York. I think it's kind of right near the Javits Center or something like that, right? So this is a creative space event that Sony has every single year for free. You know what? If you're in Manhattan area, you got to go to this. It's amazing event that they host every single year. And even if you're not, you should fly into New York to go to this thing. It's so much fun, right? And so I go every year. And here I'm doing a photo walk. Now the photo walks get a little crazy. I think me and Miguel Quiles had like over 100 people on our photo walk when it was supposed to be 20. But I don't know. People get wind of things and everybody starts coming. So we don't reject anybody. But anyways, we're walking here along this shaded area, and look at this light coming through, creating that huge reflector. So the sun is hitting that and reflecting back, creating some awesome light. Are you ready? Boom. That's what it can get you by using that reflector right off to the wall there. you're gonna love using this effect. Now, it was shining, some parts of the window was reflective, and then some parts of the building were not, and so they're gonna create these shadows, which is really good. Where do I have her look? I have her look right into the light source to get that what? Catch light in her eye. Now look at this beautiful soft light. Do you think I set anything up this up? No. Look at the catch light. What's creating this beautiful soft light? Well, we were indoors, but they had this, from floor to ceiling windows where the sun, I mean, this was probably like 2 p.m. In the bright light, and you could see that sun beating down on the ground next to the window, and that was my beautiful soft light. So I just positioned the subject where I would get the type of lighting that I wanted. So if I put the subject closer to the window, it would be a stronger light, and my shadows would be a little bit more distinct. Whereas I pull the subject further away, I can get the type of lighting that I want. So I'm controlling the light by distance to the reflector. And then I got it in the area that I wanted it, and then I took this beautiful light, but I didn't create any of it. And again, using the technique. So when I saw this model, I love this model. I said, hey, can you just dress in the darkest stuff that you got? Right. And then I saw this backdrop. I go, boom, I know this is going to create an awesome portrait right there, because I'm doing this low key type of photo that I really like. So here I'm using it in Cuba. And look at that beautiful light in the eyes. You could see it's uplight, right? And it's very even. And even if you notice that railing on the right-hand side, you could see a shadow there. So you know that light's kind of coming in off to the side. So what's the actual situation here? That's the actual situation. So in Cuba, you just kind of walk around, you find these places with open doors and have interesting characteristics to it, and you go in and take these like awesome shots. So that what's happening is that light is bouncing off that ground. That ground is my reflector. So you need to find, it's not going to be obvious all the time, but if you understand these techniques and you go, I'm going to use this beautiful diffuse light, because it was like super hot. I mean, we were shooting at midday, had to be like probably 90 to 100 degrees with humidity out there. And so we were just, you're just looking for shade to create these shots, and the door was wide open. So it allows for this beautiful light to be used, and you just use the ground as your reflector. No setup at all. Beautiful shot. I'm doing the same thing, whether it works in Havana, Cuba, or it works in Paris here. I'm using the same technique. And if you look at the ground, that ground is my reflector. And a lot of times, look at the eyes. So she's got two catch lights. She's got one by the sky coming above her, and then also from the ground below, because you can see the catch light underneath her eye. And a lot of times, as you perfect this technique, you have to find the beautiful light, but it's very subtle, right? And so a lot of times, like in the beginning career, I would just literally walk by this area. I would think if it's a nothing burger, right? But as I grow in my experience, I find these pockets of amazing light, but it's very subtle. And you just, as you grow with experience, you learn to find these like areas which are great. It's like finding gold, right? And you go, oh, this is going to be a light setup. Now, it might not be obvious. The lighting is very subtle, but you're going to see that catch light in their eye. And once you see the catch light, you're good to go. All right, so that's using open shade technique. Let's get into direct sunlight technique. So this is using the harsh light to your advantage, but actually going with it. Do you ever, sometimes you just got to go with it. and like, why fight? It's why should I fight? The sun is so strong. I'm like, I'm not gonna fight you. I'm just gonna go with, it's like when you get the arguments with your wife sometimes, and your wife is set on something, and it's like, do I really want to argue right now? I'm like, okay, yeah, wife, we can go to that restaurant. That's fine. I got food poisoning there last time, but that's okay. I don't want to argue. Let's just go, right? The sun is so strong. Why are you trying to argue with it? Just go with it. Okay. And so I've learned these techniques, and these are the best situations to use direct sunlight. How to use harsh sunlight to your advantage. Now, whenever you have vibrant colors, like if you see a beautiful blue sky, you got to use this technique, because if you see a beautiful blue sky out there, that means the sun is making not only the sky blue, but it's also making the colors in your environment just pop out. So the direct sun method is, as you can see, the sun creates matching exposures wherever the sun is shining, and if you just go with it, right? Everything is exposed correctly with no setup, and you get these beautiful, vibrant colors. So the sun is shining on the blue sky, which makes it an amazing, which is the same exposure of the mountains, which is the same exposure as the trees, which is the same exposure as the grass, and the same exposure on the subject. Now, do you think you could go in and light up the mountains with your little 600-watt flash? I'm sorry, there's just no way. So if you get asked to do an engagement session in Banff, Canada, you got to use the direct sun technique, because you want everything, you want to show where you're at, and you want to give a feeling of what it's like to be there. And you don't want to set lighting up. You just want to go shoot and capture everything. And so you use the direct sun technique, and it works amazing. Now, there's a problem with using the direct sun technique if you don't do it right. And this is what happens. Look at that. Do you love that shadow across the face? Okay, so I could take this photo. I could work hours and hours and hours on trying to get that right, and it's still going to look crappy. Not unless you're like a Photoshop expert, and they could probably do something amazing like that. But make it easy on yourself where you don't have to deal with that. You always put the nose to the light to avoid the nasty shadows, even if it means having the subject close their eyes. And so the most important thing, right? Here's the thing. I'll say nose to the light, nose to the light, nose to the light 100 billion times in my lectures with a group. Let's say we're on a workshop, and then we'll go out and we'll shoot, and then people will do photos like this. And I go, I thought I said it 100 times. Like, why are there not, like, people don't do it? Well, the thing is when you look at the back of your camera, you're looking at the overall exposure. And so the face is so small in the back of your camera. Oh, everything looks pretty much exposed, until you bring it in your computer and go, oh my gosh, the nose wasn't to the light. So just saying, you gotta look at the face first, and then look at everything else, and make sure that face is equally exposed, and put the nose to the light, especially when you're using this technique. Now, look at nose to the light, beautiful, the intense colors. Right now, I'm shooting the other way, and you get blown out. It's not as intense of colors. It's a different look, but you got two different looks here. One's using the direct sun, and one's using the sun as backlight, and using the indirect sun. Now look at this large area. Do you think you want to, light up this with your flashes? You'd have to have at least a 2-light setup here if you wanted to capture this. And let's say you're shooting the other way where the sun was behind her. But when I'm using the direct sun, it can cover a large area because the exposure in the background is the same exposure on her huge dress. And I don't have to set up any lighting at all. The sun's coming camera right, so I'm having her look towards that direction. So her face is illuminated correctly with no shadows on her face. And then I can get this shot with absolutely no sun setup. Direct sunlight is great at covering large areas with no setup. Here I am in Chicago. Now I'm in Havana, Cuba. I got a horse. Look at the blue sky there. I'm like, okay, once you see that blue sky, that's a key. And the bright colors of the dress, I go, okay, I got to use the direct sunlight technique because everything is going to pop off, right? And so I'm using the direct sunlight technique. Where do I have her chin? I have her chin looking up towards the light. As you could see, it's kind of noonish, I guess. So it wasn't like sunset or anything like that. It was in bright light, harsh light situation. As you can see, there's shadow underneath her chin. So you know the light is coming from the top. Okay, so no setup. Here again, I'm shooting a couple. It's great for shooting a couple. Now, you don't have to have them, when you're doing a couple, especially, you don't have to have them look at the light. You can have them look at each other, and the light is lighting the side view of their faces. So the light on the exposure on the face is exactly the same exposure that's in the background. No matching exposures, good to go. Don't need to set anything up. A couple looking at each other, avoid sun in the eyes. So you could always do that with a couple. Now, look at this large area. I could have chose to shoot on this side or the other side. I chose this side because I'm using the direct sun. And so the exposure on them is exactly the same exposure on the same beautiful palm trees. And I get the whole scenery. So you want to use this technique, especially if you're doing on location and you're shooting this exotic location where you got to show these beautiful landscapes. You definitely got to use this technique. So use the direct sunlight to capture wide angle scenic landscapes. Okay, how are we doing on time? We're doing pretty good. Okay, so when you're doing wide angle landscapes, direct sun works great for it. You could also use it for reflections. So if you see this direct sunlight and you see water. Now, the best reflections work when the ground is dark. So if this water was in a light colored cement or white, it doesn't work as well. You really need dark, like a street or something that's really dark where the water is sitting on top of in order for this effect to work. And a lot of times, if the sun is not bright enough on your subject to get that reflection, you can add more light onto your subject to get this kind of reflection if you want to. But you can, when you're in direct sunlight, a harsh light situation, this works good if there's water around. You can even just pour water on something dark and create this type of look if you want to. Now, I love this technique when it's creating shadows because it's automatic. So I just find a highlight, put the subject there, and boom, you get this dramatic effect because the sun is so bright on your subject when you expose for the face and when the sun is shining on the face, and because it's so bright, it makes everything darker behind it. And it creates a high contrast situation because the light on the subject is so bright, it makes everything dark. And so I love doing this technique where I just find the shadow, I put the face right there in the bright sun, and boom, it works really well. And so I'm just looking for shadows all the time. I'm looking for geometric shapes and shadows and diagonals and whatever, and it creates an interesting portrait, especially if you have this kind of drama. Black and white will look good too. So black and white images look great with shadows. So here's another shadow, right? A tree. I just put my subject right there. You got a shot, no setup, could do it literally within 30 seconds. Here I'm in Paris doing the same effect. I love using this technique, and you got, it's in your repertoire. You could always use that, but I constantly looking for shadows, shadows, shadows. You can have a big floppy hat even create the shadow for you. But when there's harsh light, there's shadows. Just remember that. So whenever the world gives you lemons, what do? You create lemonade, and that's what we're doing. I showed you this shot before, and that's it. So you could also use it as side light. So when there's harsh light out, the sun's out, right? Use the light off to the side because it'll create a shadow on the other side. So you get a highlight and shadow. So highlight and shadow always makes for a great picture. And so here I'm on the Great Wall of China. I have that super bright sun coming in on camera right there. And see the shadow, the highlight and shadow on her face and on her arms and on her body. That's really great dramatic lighting, but you're just using the sun as side light. And you can also do that in your environment. So a lot of times when I'm shooting a groom, let's say in your hotel room, they have a sliding door with a curtain. So I just close that curtain to create a little strip light coming in, and I nose towards the light, and I get this awesome effect. Here I am using it in Paris. I'm having the subject look towards the light. You see the highlight and shadow there on her face. Looks good. Here I'm in Cuba, and super bright light. Like I said, we shot like at noontime. It was like, you're in Cuba time. You plan it for the morning. You get up early, but makeup, hair, time, getting everything ready. It's noontime, right? And so that's what we're doing, but we're just working with it. Nose towards the light. Look at the highlight and shadow on her face. It has this dramatic feel to it. Turn it into black and white, and it looks great. Now, you can also do it with subtle sidelight and highlight. Now, how do you find this subtle? You look in your environment. So whenever I see repetitive highlight and shadow, then I know it's a great picture. Whenever you put your subject in repetitive highlight and shadow, it will make for a great picture 110% of the time. You just put the face towards the highlight side, boom, you got a shot. And so I look in my environment. If I see repetitive highlight and shadow, then I go there, put the subject with the face towards the highlight, and it works. Here's the same thing. See the catch light in her eye? What is it? It's long and skinny. You know that's the sky above her. That sun is coming in. Look at the beautiful highlight and shadow on her skin there on her face. Makes for a great shot, but it's very subtle. It's not very strong. Okay, so that's using side light. You can also use it as a silhouette. Now, maybe, you already know this, or maybe this is just to remind you of when you got super strong light, create a silhouette. Now, the key to creating a great silhouette is you expose for the background or the sun or the sky, right? And then it makes your subject super dark. Now, you need to create an interesting and distinctive and clearly recognizable shape, because your picture is the shape of the subject. That's what your picture is. So that's why I do a lot of profile shots, so I could see the outline of the face, and I make the subjects create interesting shapes. You can see, on the guy, I have him put his hand in his pocket, but I pushed the elbow out so I could see space in between his waist, right? Then I have him hold hands where they're creating that V, where their hands are both dropping right down, equal distance between them. And then I had her lift her arm back, because in the beginning it wasn't. So it looked like she just had one arm. So I had to pull her arm back so I could also see that too. Now, I could have separated her feet a little bit more so you could see the two legs, but oh well, I was in a rush. I was shooting and I got the shot. But yeah, I could have done it better if I separated. Now that bothers me now that I think about it. But, definitely create a distinct shape. Here I am, the sun is coming through behind. And again, I'm creating You have to create a nice shape with a silhouette. Now you can do semi-silhouettes, and when I do this with a window, I actually love blowing out the window information. Like I know I'm going to blow out the window because I just want that clean backdrop as if they were standing next to a white backdrop, because it just separates the subject and it enhances the shape a bit more. So I blow it out, and here I'm messing with my shutter speed, letting more light in, so it's kind of like a silhouette, not a strong silhouette, but you can still see some features, and that's according to your taste on how dark or how bright you want it. But you could do these what I call semi silhouettes that look great too. Here's a little bit. I didn't want this one him pure black, so I opened up my shutter a bit just to let some of that light in. And I love the wet ground, and so I like how that water glistens on the ground. So if you're ever near anything that's the ground is wet, this definitely technique will work great. Here's kind of a semi silhouette where it's blown out. Again, I love those windows blown out like that because I want to reduce the detail on it. And it looks like the sun is coming through. And whenever you got backlight there, it looks really romantic. It just has this kind of, I don't know, this romance feel to it whenever you got backlight, which I like. Okay, so now as we end up, I'm going to show you some easy ways to create light. And this is the last section, and then I'm going to do a summary. So if you have to create light, I'm going to show you some of the easiest ways to do it. So the easiest way is using a reflector. So if you got harsh light out, right, what do? You make lemonade. If there's harsh light out, you can definitely use a reflector. You don't have to buy anything. B&H has like 5 billion reflectors. You can go and buy one from them. They got all sorts of sizes, small ones. I tend to, for travel purposes, I tend to like the 42-inch 5-in-1. But a lot of times I've used the 4x6 reflector, which is great too, which is larger. And so if there is harsh light, then you don't have to pull your flashes out, set the channel and the groups and all that, and get it out of multi-mode and all that stuff. You can just pull your reflector out and start shooting, and we'll give you awesome light. It's a low cost simplicity for bright light situations. So if you don't want to mess with flash, you could just use this, because if there's bright light, reflector will work 100% of the time. And so you might think, oh, wow, a reflector. No, but that's too harsh light. No, look at this is with a reflector here. Actually, I replaced the sky. So it actually wasn't in that situation. I'm going to show you what it looks like. And so we're using a reflector there. And so it works great. And so this photo right here changed my entire workflow and thinking about this photo right here, because we went to this condo event, okay? And what happens is at this condo event, Sony spends millions of dollars on their ambassadors and their influencers, and they bring us to this like location. It changes every year, and they have all these amazing creative setups. They usually tell us we have to use a certain camera or whatever and then tag it and all that kind of stuff. And so they have movie crews set your lighting up, and they're people doing video and they're doing stills. And so what they do is they use, now look how this is lit. This is lit by huge reflectors. And I'm thinking, you know what? Why do I make my life hard with bringing all this light? If I'm in a bright light situation, why don't I just do what the movie crews do and use reflectors and make it easy on myself? And so I started using this technique. Yeah, I knew about reflectors, but I just didn't think about it in this way. If there's harsh light, then yeah, there's reflectors. So here it is, doing the same effect. I got the backlight. I love hair like this. Got the rim light, bringing a little reflector in, camera right, add that light in. I didn't set up a flash. This literally took 10 seconds to set up, just bringing a reflector over. Same thing here. super bright light. Now I want you to look at the tree to the right. Where's the shadow? The shadow is straight down. So where does that mean the sun is? I mean, we did this walk around and it was about noontime. And it was summertime in Paris. It was really hot. The sun was, what did I use? This is just a reflector. I didn't get my flash out or anything like that. This way, when I'm using constant light, I can also use video, or I could use stills. And so if you're doing weddings and things like that, and you got a videographer, they're going to love you pulling the reflector out because you could do both videos and stills, no problem. Here's another situation, bright light. What are we doing? Just bringing a little reflector in to add some light. Looks amazing. Here's the sun is setting this way. What's the situation? I'm using the gold reflector here, bringing that light back in. Easy peasy, no setup, video, stills. Guess what? It's time to bring your reflector out and start using it again, because it's going to make your life easy in a bright light situation. Now, sometimes I forget my reflector. So what did I do here? I have my shoot through umbrella because I was all into, creating light and all that kind of stuff. And so I didn't have a reflector, so I have a shoot through umbrella. So I just use that as my reflector. I do that a lot, because usually to create soft light, I'm bringing that around with me, and I use it all the time. Okay, so now let's say you're in a low light situation. I love using the video light. Okay, so when you're in a low light situation, you set and this is environmental light. So what's the process here? You set the light to your background, because obviously I can't light up the Eiffel Tower. I have to let that light work for me. I can't light up that carousel. So I exposed for that. Now, where my subjects are, there's actually no light there. So it's complete darkness. So if you look to the right and see how dark it is, that's how dark it is where they are. Now, by the way, that movie Ratatouille, it's true. There must have been like 100 rats walking around the ground over there to the right. But just to let you know, when you go to this place in Paris at nighttime, the rats are going to come out. Don't worry about it. Okay, so I set the exposure for the background first, and then I just add the light, and I just use the video light. Now here I'm in a subway. I set my background light to the background, and then they're kind of dark. So what I do, I just add a little video light. But you might go, Scott, that video light looks amazing. How did I do it? I just shined the video light. I couldn't have enough room to do an umbrella. I shined it up at the ceiling and have it come up and down, reflect down. It looks beautiful, right? So you set your background exposure first, and then add light onto your subject according to taste. Okay, so here it is. I set my exposure for the Chicago in the background there. They're completely dark. I have my video light through an umbrella, and it looks great. And I just set according to taste. If you want it darker, you lower the video light. If you make it stronger, you make it brighter. You got to have a pretty decent video light to do it. But you set your background first, use a video light, and then the key is to do a shoot through umbrella at least 33 inches wide to get you that beautiful soft light. And I do it all the time, and then you adjust according to your taste. What you see is what you get. That's why I love video. And also you could roll video with it too. Here's my ISO is 8000 because that Long Island is very dim. So I had to bring up my ISO. Then I add video light on my subject, right? Same thing, works in Paris, right? So here's the setup here, set for the background exposure, and then I light them up, easy peasy, right? And I usually have it high, up higher, coming down like a lamppost, to make that light look like a lamppost, and it works. I'm doing the same technique here. Works everywhere with a little video light. Works here. I set the background exposure to the Louvre in the background. Good. It works in Vegas, doing the same thing. Same thing. Even in Cuba, right? I'm doing it. This is video light here. I have a super strong video light. Set the background first, add that video light. It's almost as strong as a flash here. And you still can do that here. Now here's another techniques with the flash. If you're indoors, I love bouncing the flash up and having it go on the ceiling and come down. Now, if your ceilings are black, this won't work. But if your ceilings are white, even if they're 20, 30 feet up, that flash is so strong, it will go up and come down and give you this beautiful soft light. And I just set it for TTL, especially if the subjects are moving, because the distance will change. And when the distances changes, you have to have it in TTL to get the right exposure. And I do this all the time. And I usually set it to minus 0.7 to minus 1.7 exposure because I just want to kiss the light on my subject to make it look organic still. And that's what I look at these beautiful shots here during the toast, right? That beautiful soft light, that's just my on-camera flash. You get this look. And then look at it, you could even do a large group shots with this technique if you got a white ceiling and you don't have to do any setup with the on-camera flash pointing up. Then you can even do long exposures and do these different types of effects with your flash. And I'm just having fun with it at this time. And I'm creating that. I'm also doing a real wedding workshop. If you're interested, you can scan that code and learn about how you can shoot a real wedding with me. Okay, this is an on-camera flash, but I'm just pointing it towards the subject, even though my camera's pointing it in a different direction. My camera's pointing straight forward, but I'm having the flash point to the right. And so it's firing off to the side, and you can do that. Okay, so I'm about to end and give this the summary, but I just want to let you know I got 2 commercials. If you want to come with me to Cuba, I'm going October 3rd to the 9th. There's more information there. And I'm also doing a Hong Kong workshop with Sabrina Dang, another Sony artisan. She is a native of Hong Kong, so she's going to hook us up with their styling and the models, and it's going to be amazing. December 2nd through 6th, if you're interested there, and the information's there. Okay, so let's go through the summary now as we're ending up. I told you first about the full lighting spectrum and solutions to shoot in low light, open shade, and then also bright light. We're using the open shade technique, using the direct sunlight technique, right? Because the direct sunlight, the subject and the background are the same exposure. It has a lot of advantages to that, and it makes the colors pop. And then if you're always in a bright light, you can just use a reflector. If there's always harsh light, you definitely can use a reflector at all times, 100% of the time. If there is, you can use the sun as your backlight, which is great to do. And the video light is the easiest to create your own light. And I believe that's it. So I'm going to I don't know if there's any questions, or I'm going to bring it back to the other guys. I could stop my share here. And if there's any questions or anything, or if we can wrap it up. I know we went a little bit over time.
No worries. Never a worry, Scott. We always have time for a couple questions. We'll start it off. How powerful is the video light used?
I think you need a video light. I would say nowadays, if you're going to shoot an open shade area and use it too, you'd probably at least 5,000 lumens or a 60-watt video light at least. That's what I would recommend.
Okay. What do you find yourself with you? What technique do you use the most in hard light? Is there one that kind of outweighs the others?
I definitely look for shade. I look for
Interesting.
shade, so I don't have to set anything up, and then I got soft light, and then I love looking for those like shadow shade things. That's like my main thing.
Interesting.
And then at the end, if there's a beautiful blue sky, I use the direct sunlight because I want to capture large areas. I'm an environmental photographer, so I want to capture large areas and get the beautiful blue sky with the clouds and the colors and especially if you got your subjects that are dressed in bright red or yellow, it just really pops with direct sunlight.
Awesome. We have another question from online. How do you expose with video light, and how do you adjust the power of the video light?
Well, again, you set your background first. So if you're in a dark area, I usually point my camera where there's lights. And so I expose for those lights. Then I bring my subject in. the subject, you're not going to be able to see it. So then you turn your video light, put it through like a shoot through umbrella, and then just get it 3 feet or closer to your subject if you can. The closer that is, the more professional and soft that light's going to look. And then you just turn it up to taste. You know, if you want it brighter, then you turn it up. If you want it more darker, like cinematic, a lot of times when you see cinema, they don't want to blow out their background. So a lot of times their subject is a bit darker than their background. But you see that all the time in the movies. And so maybe you might want that look, right? Or maybe you want your subject brighter. It's just up to your own taste. But the important thing is to set the background. Look for an area where there's lights, which works the best. Set that first and then add your light.
Perfect. And as you were answering that, we had another question come in. It's kind of the same on that exposing for the background and then focusing on the subject. So if you guys do have any other questions on that, I do also want to throw out, we're going to have Scott back on May 28th to do ambient and artificial light, how he balances ambient artificial light. So this kind of, I'm guessing we'll go into some of the same things, talking about lighting and how to meter for which. And
Yes.
nobody does ambient and artificial. I know I say this all the time, but when I think of you, Scott, I think of balancing ambient and artificial. So if you guys have not seen how Scott does this, he's one of the very few people that I have to zoom in his pictures and dissect them to try to figure out, is it natural? I never know. I never know if it's natural or what you used. So that's kind of,
That's what, to me,
yeah, go
that's
ahead.
when you're doing lighting correctly when the person doesn't even know. Like, what kind of lighting, right? So it's
Yeah.
just the same way when you watch movies. They make it look like, sunset when it's in the studio
Yeah.
or something like that. Or,
It looks like it's just really good. Like, oh wow, we just got really good natural light, and you don't know what's the natural light, what's
Yep.
the artificial. Yeah, that's the best way to do it. I agree. Scott, I want to thank you. Stayed a little bit extra to answer a couple questions for you guys. Always a pleasure having you on. Like I said, May 28th, we're going to have Scott back to discuss ambient and artificial light and how to balance the two. So if it's not on your calendar, it should be. Definitely check Scott out on Instagram. Check the website out. Check to see what workshops he has going on at any given time. And always check us out on YouTube, B&H Event Space, for free educational content. That's all we have in the books for now. Huge thank you to Scott Robert Lim and Sony for hosting another edition of the B&H Virtual Event Space, now in the books. Catch y'all next time.